Yeah, we're live.
Yeah.
No, okay. Yeah. The question is this being recorded? It is, right?
Yeah, it's being recorded.
It is now being recorded?
It is.
Okay, but we don't have any viewers, so we have to wait until somebody comes up, or should we do the recording later only after people turn up?
Oh, it started recording, so now whatever is from now on will be recorded.
Okay.
We can edit out.
We can edit out, is it?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, we have 0 viewers right now. Hopefully people will turn up.
Viewers? No, mine says no viewers.
Yeah, we have no viewers right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like going to a classroom and standing there with no students around.
And wondering if any are going to come.
Yes, that's right. Did they forget or what?
We sent a reminder this morning.
Yeah.
So by the time they come,
yeah,
we can do some math stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So here is something I've been thinking about. If you take if you take a string like this, not a metal string, and if you do this, it's the same string. Doesn't matter what you do, right? You can bend it and so on.
Okay.
But what remains constant is the length.
Yeah.
The length doesn't change, but the shape changes.
Okay.
Now, if it's like a rubber band like this, it is joined together. As long as you don't cut it, it's like in topology, remains the same. The length remains the same. In topology, you can also change the length, but here you cannot change the length. Length is still constant, but notice the shape changes. I can make a square out of it, or I can make an ellipse out of it, circle, whatever. And then I can also do this. So one is single line, one on top of the other. Doesn't look like that, but if it is regular thread, it'll be like that.
Yeah.
So again, there is no length change, but the area changes and the shape changes.
Yeah.
But as in kind of knot theory, they are equivalent knots. Like this is.
Yeah, even if you.
Yeah. But if you do it.
Area. What do you mean by area here?
Area is
closed.
So imagine this is a circle. Imagine this is a circle.
So you're talking about the area enclosed.
Enclosed area, right?
Surface area of the sphere of the.
Yeah. You take this as a surface. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, enclosed area. So you make it an ellipse, whatever, etc. The enclosed area would change. And the reason why I was thinking about it was I once did an exercise about taking a rectangle and making it into a parallelogram.
Yeah.
And asked the question, which has greater area, rectangle or the parallelogram? People couldn't answer that question. So I said, okay, take a rectangle and just imagine that you're doing this. You are slanting. At some, we don't have that.
No, so give me that same string that you.
Yeah. So at some point it'll.
Yeah.
Right.
The parallelogram, the two lines kind of meet, like squashed. So at that time there is no area. In spite of doing that, they couldn't think that any parallelogram has less area than the corresponding rectangle when the sides are equal.
Okay.
So to get a sense of feel for that, if you have this exercise, where what is constant is the.
You have this, and if you squish it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You have 3 viewers.
Yeah. So if you have something like, if you have a concept of something that has invariance and variability, the length is invariant, but the area enclosed and the shape are variable.
Yeah.
This will be like saying that in a diamond and graphite, the atoms are the same, but the crystal structures change. Or like in water, it's the same molecule, but their relations are different. Like solid, liquid, gas.
So actually, one way of getting them to see that the rectangle, the parallelogram has less area than the rectangle with the same side, is if they didn't get it the other way. One way to do it would be to do this. You cut this bit off and put it here. And now you draw that same rectangle which you had earlier. And it looks something like this.
That should be more like mathematical proof, whereas the other is simply
do that thing in ninth. I don't know why they didn't understand. The other way could be if you have a number of tiles, small square tiles, and you arrange them to form a figure, you will have the area invariant, whereas the length would change. When you're talking of length here, you're talking of the perimeter.
length. When I say length, I mean the length of the periphery. Yeah.
So if you have a number of tiles, you arrange like you have say 10 tiles and you're covering the squares of a chessboard. You choose neighboring squares. You can arrange those 10 tiles in different ways. For many of the arrangements, you will get the length of the boundary to be different. But because you have the same 10 tiles, the area will be invariant there. Then you flip the thing. Now you look at this. What is invariant here and what is varying?
You could actually try both. Yeah, take a rectangle, take the same area and change the shape, and then you discover that the length changes. Yeah, both are possible. Hey, incidentally, there are 3 viewers, so should we stop our private conversation and invite the viewers to ask questions?
Yeah, I've already asked people to ask questions, but once again, so for people who are watching, on the right there's something which says ask questions. It's a Q&A app. So if you start asking questions there, we'll see them once.
Yeah, no, so far nobody has asked questions, so we don't know what to say. Yeah.
So
that's fine. So can they at least write who they are so that we can see who they are?
Do we know who the
we don't know.
Are?
Yeah, I'm assuming that they can see us, right?
Yeah, they can see us.
Yeah. So can the 3 viewers say who they are so that we can say hi to you? Incidentally, if you can see us, I am Mohanan, and
Tara, if you can see.
Madhav.
Jayashree.
Yeah. Vagish and Sriparna are not here. They are tied up, so they won't be joining us, most likely.
Okay. So, otherwise, in any case, do we want to start with some of the things which came up in the in the discussion so far?
We could, what if more people join? We may have to repeat.
Yeah.
We'll wait till about, let's say, 3-4 minutes more.
And also, did the viewers get the message?
Yeah, sure. Priyanka's message.
Hi, Sriram.
Hi, Sriram. Yeah.
Priyanka.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who else?
Select.
No, but then if you click, then it'll appear there. You don't have to answer that. Sriram is not asking a question. He's just saying, hi, this is Sriram, right? Okay. Vaidishwaran is here.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah. All right. Hi. Hi, Sriram, and hi, Priyanka, and hi, Vaidesh. Yeah. Okay. I guess 3 more minutes, and if there are only 3 viewers, we start anyway.
Okay.
In the meantime, however, if they have some questions, that may be a good thing to start with. Questions or comments or objections, complaints, whatever comments. This is a good way of having conversation. Okay, maybe we should say something such that it will trigger some questions. I'm hoping that it's very clear for all of you, or at least most of you, what the distinction is between knowledge orientation and inquiry orientation. So rather than learning that the earth goes down the sun, we figure out why we should believe that.
Yeah. There's a question.
Is there something as I didn't see that. Okay, let me see. Let me select that question. Okay. So I assume that everybody can see. This is not Sriram's question.
No,
okay,
it's
okay.
Shanka's
Sorry.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she had put this in the learning, assignment which she has submitted also.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that assignment yet. Okay. I don't know what you mean by passive inquiry. So let me make a guess about what it could be. So if you're reading a book and if you're following the arguments of the author and evaluating it, you are not inquiring, but you are following somebody else's inquiry. Is that what you mean by passive inquiry?
What she had described was like, when you teach something, you hear that you're not able to understand. She had written that in the context of the discussions that we have, part of the things are clear to her and part of the things are not clear when she reads the mail. But the things, it goes on inside her mind, and there comes a time when, she sees light.
Something crystallizes.
What she has called as passive inquiry. So she asks, is that what is happening to her? Is that inquiry of some sort? That's how I understood her. Shanka, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
So yeah, so that sort of inquiry where you're where you take time, assimilate things in your mind after reading something or going through something, is, I would say, that's how people come up with new ideas, things like that. No one comes up with new ideas through just like a deductive steps of reasoning. It comes to you. Who was that mathematician, Mo? Who was it? Who said, once I get on the steps of the bus?
Yeah, the Poincaré. Suddenly the insight happens. Yeah, but no, I think Shreyanka's question is not actually that she pursues some question and the answer suddenly occurs to her. If I understand Jayashree right, what Shreyanka is saying, she's trying to understand some text, something that we have written.
Yeah, and Shreyanka says that's right. What Jayashree said is right.
So I'm clicking on that one. Yeah. So if that's the case, no, there is no question here. We are only trying to communicate something, and you didn't first get it, and you think about it, actively engage with it in your head, and then you understand it. So I would say it is comprehension, except that it takes some effort to have that comprehension. It is still comprehension, not inquiry.
Yeah, but if you want to extend that further to passive inquiry, that's also very in the same way. That then.
But would you call it passive though?
The question is, can inquiry be passive?
Yeah. Inquiry, it might happen inside your head, but it is still active. So what Poincaré was doing was actually engaging with it actively, but except that he was not conscious of it. It was unconscious, active inquiry. So inquiry can be passive or active.
No.
Inquiry can be unconscious or conscious.
Yes.
But
it cannot be passive.
It cannot be passive.
Be active.
Yeah.
Because inquiry involves activity, mental activity.
Yeah. So Vedishwar has asked a question to maybe useful to distinguish between thinking and inquiry. I see it being used without the distinction.
Yeah. We'll answer Vaidishwaran's question later. So I think because sorry, who's
Sriram also has a question.
This is they're both Vaidishwaran's.
Okay, they are both Vaidishwaran's question. We'll take the second question first. What happened?
So let's do the distinction between thinking and inquiry. Yeah, Mo, it's being answered right now. So let's. I selected it.
Okay, you clicked on it. Okay, right. Sorry, I can't see that on my screen though.
Oh, so if you click on questions over there and go to answered questions.
Where is that? On the panel on the left?
On the panel on the right, there's a little drop down that says questions on top.
Drop down.
A little thing, questions. It says questions with a little arrow. The heading of the Q&A app.
I can't see that anyway. Doesn't matter.
Okay, let me just read out the question. It may be useful to distinguish between thinking and inquiry. I see it being used without a distinction.
Go down. It's further down here. further
No,
down.
it's not on that screen.
Oh.
There is no screen for me.
Yeah, I'll just read it out. Maybe you should have seen thinking and inquiry. I see it being used without a distinction.
Yeah, I had actually seen that question earlier, but it disappeared. But doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay, maybe because of that. Yeah. Thinking. Okay, that is Sriram's question, right?
Vaidishwaran.
Vaidishwaran, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I guess so. So if you're doing something with your mind, making connections, reflecting on something, that would be thinking, but not necessarily inquiry. Inquiry, in other words, inquiry requires thinking, but thinking does not necessarily involve inquiry, is my feeling.
If you think in terms of activities,
yeah,
the activity of inquiry is a subset of the activity right?
of thinking.
Of
yeah.
Thinking.
So there is a question by Shreyanka. Says, is there something as unconscious inquiry?
Actually, that is interesting. Yes, there should be, because sometimes it's because we are thinking something all the time. There's something working at the back of our mind. We're not thinking consciously, and then the answer pops up. That I think would be. I would take that as unconscious inquiry.
So the earlier example of Poinkar is inquiry. You're struggling with some problem, and you go to sleep, and your mind somehow works out the solution to the problem. And the next morning you wake up, and suddenly it appears to you.
And it probably happens much more often than we realize.
Yeah. Which is why it is important to get students into that mode, that the mind begins to work on it even without their awareness. That is when real research or real inquiry happens. Madhav, you want to add something to it, some experience? This is, I've discovered that this is not easy when you try to explain this to someone.
Yeah.
They kind of stare at you with incomprehension.
So actually, for me, I'm sure most people have the thing of epiphany in the shower.
Okay, that's true. Yeah.
They're coming up. So you've thought through something for a really long time, whether it's a problem for an exam or a problem for a homework or something of that sort in your life, and suddenly you get the answer while having a shower or something of that sort.
Yeah.
So that's happened to me various times during college when you suddenly come up with a solution. But yeah, so I'm guessing a lot of people would have had that.
Yeah. Shreyanka has another question. Could one say inquiry is goal-oriented, whereas thinking may not be?
Yeah, I think that sounds quite right. Thinking is you are doing something actively, but you don't aim at something. Inquiry has to be goal-oriented.
Well, what about unconscious inquiry then?
Well, it could be unconscious. Unconscious mind is working in a goal-oriented way versus not goal-oriented.
Or you've set yourself a question and the mind is working.
The unconscious mind picks it up and works on it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that sounds like a good distinction to me. Vaidishwaran says, but it could be a result of thinking and not necessarily inquiry.
Sure, we don't know which one it is very often. I mean, we can't tell. But if you've set yourself a question and have thought seriously about it, and it keeps working at the back of your mind without you thinking about it, that would be unconscious inquiry. It would be thinking as well. I mean, in the sense that it's still the question that's driving the thinking, at least in a vague way. It would be inquiry, not just goalless thinking.
So Sriram has a question. If you scroll down, the problem with unconscious inquiry of the Poinkar kind is that it can be detected only in retrospect, right?
Sure.
So my unconscious mind will act on it, and when I wake up, I will have made some progress. No,
you
don't
absolutely.
think.
Yeah. If it doesn't become conscious, you wouldn't even know that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Shreyanka's asked, could you talk a bit about the role of imagination with respect to inquiry?
Yeah, this this is kind of hard.
Tough one.
I guess the easiest example would be mathematics, where you create a world with your imagination, and then you work on the imagined world.
Imagine the objects of the
Yeah,
world.
you create worlds through your imagination, and so like, what example should we give, Mother, for mathematics?
Mathematics. So maybe
One example would be
graph theory. Euler. Graph theory. So seeing the bridge.
Graph theory,
yeah. No, but the point is, okay, we'll have to explain the origins of graph theory.
So Euler had this problem about, a lot of people may have heard it, the bridges of Königsberg, which was, there were 7 bridges and 4 islands or 3 islands? 4 islands. And you had to get from one to cover all of the bridges, and you had to basically cover all of the bridges without going through one more than once, any one more than once. So you had to go through each one only once. Could it be done or could it not be done was the question. And in order to solve that question, Euler treated the islands as nodes and the bridges as nodes or vertices, and the bridges as edges between nodes slash vertices. And from this, he created a mathematical theory based on with these nodes and with some axioms, and was able to prove that in that situation it couldn't be done. And from that one problem, which Euler converted from a physical problem to a mathematical theory, the whole theory of mathematics was created, which is very useful within mathematics and even outside. So in linguistics, it's a very useful part of linguistics, for example, and useful part of biology. That one. So the imagination was very involved there. Then, in fact, Riemann taking Euclidean geometry and changing one axiom a little bit, the parallel postulate, was able to create various other geometry, which then found use later on. But it was his imagination which allowed him to do that.
Actually, a lot of times when you're doing research, it is inquiry combined with imagination that gives you a new idea.
Or you can track inquiry as part of imagination.
As part of imagination that gives you a new idea.
The creation of any new theory is like that. In fact, there's a fantastic quote from Einstein to that effect. We'll try to find out and send it to you. The idea that space could be curved, Einstein had. The idea that gravity could cause a space curvature. All these are imaginary activities. There is.
Sorry, I meant imagination as a process to trigger inquiry.
Oh, fair. That's question.
The math examples are of that type.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You create a world and then that triggers inquiry.
Vaidisharan has something subconscious rather than conscious. Perhaps.
Yeah, we are not distinguishing between unconscious and subconscious.
Yeah.
For him, he does, and so for him, that's important.
It's quite possible, yeah. We are not actually using this, the Freudian divisions of mind.
Simply means thinking without being conscious of
that's it, yeah. There is another question from Vaidisharan. There's any remarks on whether the course is moving in line with what you expected? I think so. From my point of view, yes, it is. There is fairly intense activity, and there also seems to be a great deal of learning happening both for us and for the participants, and there's a lot of peer learning as well. We can also see that there is a overwhelmingness, perhaps, that people feel.
Overwhelmedness.
Yes.
Which all of you and all of us feel also.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that's the part that perhaps some of the participants may not appreciate. We get up, at least I get up at 3 o'clock and go on. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to cope with this. So I also feel overwhelmed. Everybody does. So that's part of the game.
Yeah. But I think one other thing about this, I think we had a conversation yesterday about moving from. We've had a lot of discussion on theoretical things like Bloom's taxonomy, things like that, which are interesting discussions. But for us, for this course, our focus was to make it more practical and actually do things which get to actually creating inquiry tasks rather than rather than having these discussions, just having these discussions. These discussions are important, but also along with that, actually creating assessment tasks, creating inquiry tasks, etc. Which I think we would like it to move towards more of that and less of the principal discussion.
Yeah.
Perhaps from at this point we're just into the third week. Perhaps from the learning trigger 3, maybe we can add some of that to learning trigger 3. Some activity of that kind, and then very mildly initially, and then increase it as we go along.
Yeah.
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. I should actually add that Bloom's taxonomy discussion is in fact
practical.
It's a kind of related to practical stuff, except it might probably be more useful to bring it back after about 2 or 3 months.
When the participants have dealt with inquiry assessment and things, and I think at that point.
What's this question?
There's a question from Shreyanka. Says, is there anything as over inquiry or a point at which it becomes counterintuitive?
Actually, sometimes inquiry does lead. I don't know if this is what you mean, but sometimes inquiry leads us to answers that end up being the counter of what our intuition initially said. But we have to take that whatever it is that is counterintuitive, because we have the evidence for it. So we might end up in situations of that kind.
Yeah. So, for example, for a child, and actually for you also, and everybody here, for us, the intuitive thing is that the Earth is stationary.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
That was the example I was going to take. Yes.
Yeah.
And for us to accept that the Earth is not stationary, it should be something which takes some effort. We accept it because adults tell us, but that ought not to be the way it happens.
The intuition doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Intuition doesn't.
Yeah, 2 things. One, Shreyanka has another question or comment, and there are 5 viewers, so somebody else has joined.
Who are the 2 additional viewers? Can you introduce yourself so that we know who we are speaking to?
For the new viewers on the right, the question and answer thing. So you can type in questions and actually even just introduce yourself over there on.
So we'll wait for the 3 additional viewers, 3 new ones to tell us who they are. The existing ones are Shreyanka, Vaideshwar, and Sriram. Who are the other 3? Okay, the 6 became 5 again.
Yeah, that's been going back and forth. So somebody is having trouble with the internet.
Yes.
Okay. So do we want to pick up on Shreyanka's thing right now? Then.
Why not? I mean, while the others type their names.
I think that's something that we need to think about first.
Right? So we'll make it so maybe we can have a reflection assignment, another output assignment. What would be?
Yeah, actually, all of the assignments are initially reflection, and then
then output. Yeah,
right. So
everything requires reflection. You can't have output without reflection. So, and then without output, we can't give you feedback. So you need both.
So the other thing we should probably pick up on is also the way which you had started on, but then we got a few questions, was the inquiry versus knowledge, as well as the inquiry versus inquiry-based, inquiry-oriented versus inquiry-based.
Sorry, what's the last thing you said, Myron?
Inquiry versus knowledge. Inquiry-oriented education versus knowledge-oriented education, and inquiry-based learning versus inquiry-oriented learning.
Yeah.
Because these are very important bits which we have addressed multiple times.
Yeah, that's central to this course. Yeah. I guess very briefly traditional education is knowledge oriented in the following sense. Knowledge, at least in academia, is a body of conclusions that researchers have arrived at. And these conclusions are given to students. But students don't have any understanding of the processes that led to the conclusions, and they can't arrive at conclusions on their own. So if you shift from knowledge to inquiry, from knowledge orientation to inquiry orientation, the focus shifts from the conclusions per se to the ways of arriving at those conclusions. So on what basis, for example, did people decide that atoms are divisible? How did scientists decide that electrons are negatively charged? How did scientists decide that from one species came all the other existing species? And so on. So these are the kinds of questions that would take up the space in inquiry-oriented education. And then there would also be another component, namely helping the students to arrive at their own conclusions. Not simply receive the conclusions that researchers have come up with, but moving from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. So that's the main distinction between knowledge orientation and inquiry orientation.
I think somebody brought up that the current education system in a lot of places in India and around the world is not even knowledge oriented.
That is true.
It's not even giving you an understanding of the conclusions.
Yeah.
It's just giving you bits of information which are completely unconnected.
Yeah.
So knowledge orientation would be a big step up in terms of the quality of education.
Absolutely.
What we're asking for is something even beyond that.
Yeah. So actually, my favorite example for that will be the 6th chapter of social studies in NCERT. Not the 6th chapter, the 1st chapter on sky and what is it? Earth and the sky. Where students are told that the axis of the Earth is tilted. They have no idea what axis means. They have no idea what tilt means. So when we try to ask students where is the axis, given something, they're looking for some kind of bump or some kind of stick upon the sphere, because they are given the globe with the axis represented as a stick, and so they require a physical stick to see the axis and see the tilt. They have no idea that the axis is related to rotation. So they don't understand it. They simply have the words that they can repeat. So even understanding is missing.
Yeah. So then, so that's between knowledge and inquiry. Please ask questions about this, because this one is very important to the course. So everybody needs to ask. But so the other one which we should touch on is inquiry oriented versus inquiry based.
Right. Yeah. So I've been answering all these questions. I think now somebody else can answer, because if I answer, I'll say exactly the same kinds of things. So let's try hearing a different voice.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I don't mind going.
Okay.
So the difference between inquiry-oriented education and inquiry-based learning, the distinction here is between goals of education and between. I think Sriram has a question on knowledge-oriented learning, which maybe we should pick up first.
Yeah. Should we answer that question before you finish or after you finish?
Let me finish then. Okay. So the difference between inquiry-based learning and inquiry-oriented learning is one. Inquiry-oriented learning is the goals of education, or inquiry-based learning is the means to achieve the goals. So actually, one way of thinking about it is inquiry oriented learning is the equivalent of, so the goals of education are the equivalent of, if you want to travel from Delhi to Bombay, your goal is to reach Bombay, right? Or if your goal is to go reach Hyderabad, that's your goal, or to reach Brazil. But the method with which you reach it is the equivalent of the pedagogy, the inquiry-based learning, or project-based learning, or whatever. So if you want to get from Delhi to Bombay, you have various ways you can do it. You can cycle, you can walk, you can run, you can take a car, take a plane. There are obviously some things better suited to a particular goal. So, for example, it makes more sense to fly or take a train to Bombay than it does to walk to Bombay. Or it makes more sense to fly to Brazil rather than I don't know, taking a train. I don't think you can. So similarly, inquiry-based learning is a very good pedagogy for inquiry-oriented learning. But there are various other pedagogies which are also very appropriate to inquiry-oriented learning. For example, even lecturing is one. So recently, Monan's been doing a course on syntax and semantics at IISA, which we recorded and is on our YouTube channel. And that stuff is an example of lecturing in order to, at least the first session was an example of lecturing in order to arrive at inquiry ability, rather than just getting the students involved. So there are various, so the distinction between pedagogy and the goals of education are what's at stake here in the distinction between inquiry-based and inquiry-oriented. Yeah.
Can I just add something there? In inquiry-based learning, you don't necessarily learn to do inquiry. You're just using inquiry perhaps for understanding or for something else, right? Whereas in inquiry-oriented learning, you are learning to do inquiry, and of course it requires you to do inquiry in order to learn it, but that's not the only way to learn inquiry, right? So
yeah, actually,
just a slightly different way to put that. If
the converse of it will be a lecture course on research methodology.
Right.
It's not inquiry based at all, but what you're learning is how to do research, which is learning inquiry. Yeah.
To give an example, like which we have been using the grandma example, it's a known fact that my grandmother cannot be 5 years old when I was born. So why are we doing that? We are doing that because we expect you to acquire certain skills, understanding definitions, being able to come up with the propositions, and being able to prove that. So our aim in doing that is in giving you those skills. So we are being inquiry oriented there.
Okay.
There are two new people.
There are a couple of questions or comments from Sriram, and Suman and Riddhi have joined. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hi Suman and hi Riddhi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, good. You're listening.
They say we are, like you said, overwhelmed with the amount of thoughts being discussed. So we don't have a question yet. Okay. All right. Sriram. Yeah.
Knowledge-oriented learning.
Click that select.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
One view in favor of knowledge-oriented learning is that it's within the capabilities of a human being in terms of the growth stages from being a child to an adult. I'm not sure if children are not capable of inquiry. Children are actually quite capable of inquiry, and they enjoy inquiry.
Actually, can I just, before we even go there,
that
we do inquiry-oriented learning does not mean that we're saying we don't need to have knowledge.
Yeah.
Because without knowledge, there can be no inquiry. Right? You have to have some knowledge. And in the process of inquiry, you are building knowledge. So in knowledge-oriented learning, you're only getting knowledge. In inquiry-oriented learning, you're getting both knowledge and inquiry.
Yeah.
So actually, inquiry-oriented learning is not negating knowledge-oriented learning completely.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good way to express it. The opposition is between learning that is oriented only towards knowledge and learning that is oriented towards both knowledge and inquiry.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is add to the current goals of education, and not replace them with what we are saying.
How are you going to write it? I mean, is there some way for Tara to?
What I'll do is I'll write it on a piece of paper.
Here is something that Vaidiswaran says that Tara. Okay, you want to write on this?
What?
Vaidiswaran wants Tara to write that.
I'm not sure what I said.
You need a hard cover or something?
This is okay. Keep going. There's something that Sriram asked long ago, and
which is that?
we haven't later in life when he becomes.
No, this is a continuation of his earlier question.
Okay.
Because there seems to be a limit on the amount of characters you can type on.
Oh, okay, okay.
So this is a continuation of his other question. Let's select it.
Okay, if I understand Sriram right, what you're saying is that you might memorize something initially without understanding, but you might understand it later. I think this is a statement that many people have made. Is that, I don't know if that's what Sriram means.
But he also says that, but as an adult, one won't even be able to memorize, etc. I'm not sure what he means by that, because I don't think there's a problem with memorizing as an adult, is there?
Well, it depends on what you mean by memorize. So, for example, I memorized Sanskrit slokas when I was a kid. And I didn't understand the meanings. That is truly memorization. You keep repeating it, and it sticks on your brain. But storing something in your memory is a different situation. Like, there are many things I remember without memorizing because they are meaningful to me. So it is true that there are many things that you have to have in your memory, but whether or not memorizing is necessary is a different question. It might be mildly helpful. So what did I gain by memorizing Sanskrit slokas? It's unclear. What did I learn by memorizing the multiplication tables? Yes, there is some marginal utility. When I do some calculations, these things come to mind. I can recite these multiplication tables. I can do them incidentally only in Malayalam, not in English. That suggests that I'm doing some kind of meaningless activity of words because I can't do multiplication tables in English.
I can't do them in any language.
I see. You didn't memorize.
I'm very
Yeah. Okay. In fact, there are some people for whom the reciting of multiplication tables will have to be accompanied by a certain stringing. They have to do it like this. So I remember that my classmates used to do this. I'm doing this Malayalam, and you have to swing. So the words just come out because of that. Yeah, it's some extent helpful, but if you do only that, I don't know if that becomes education. Everything may have some place. It's a question of priority. There's a question from Sriram.
That's about character typing.
Yeah, is there some restriction on the number of characters? Possibly.
I'm guessing there is.
Yeah.
Probably has some.
You will have to type two messages. That's the only way. Write continued at the end. So that there are two. Yeah.
Okay, so Shriyanka has a question. Given that there are different learning styles, visual, tactile, etc., could you talk about how inquiry orientation might address different learning styles?
We could use all of those styles of learning. So, for example, there is a kind of idea of visual reasoning that many mathematicians have been trying to do, and we engage in visual reasoning, visual pattern formation, etc. in mathematics and many other subjects as well. I don't know if we are ready to go into the details in the third week of this course, but other than saying yes, all these would contribute to inquiry. Some people engage in inquiry through formal symbols. Some people engage in inquiry through concepts. Some engage in inquiry through visual modes, tactile modes, algebraic modes. All these different modes come together. These are simply different modes of finding patterns and modes of thinking and so on. All of them contribute to inquiry, and different people use different styles. Feynman used to think in tactile terms. He would roll on the floor and move around to get a theoretical solution. Yeah, Madhav, you were saying something.
No, and one of the important things is to try and develop students in as many of these different ways of finding patterns as possible. Yeah. And at least expose them to all of these different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's through just drawing pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I am a compulsive diagram maker. So is Tara. And Tara's brother is a compulsive tables maker. He makes tables in order to think. Different people have different styles of learning and styles of thinking. Tara, I don't know if your sentence is too small. Okay, let's see.
No,
I mean, the letters. You're supposed to show it on the screen, right? Is that
what the idea is? No, I thought we could just email it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So Tara is writing that sentence, and we'll email that sentence. I thought Tara was going to write it and show it on the screen.
No, you can't. I can't do that.
Oh, okay.
Which sentence?
The sentence about what was the sentence?
There was something that was it. I've forgotten. Was it Sriram or Vaidishwaran who asked if I could write that distinction between knowledge-oriented and inquiry-oriented learning? What I had said, and I was writing it down. We'll just email it to everyone after that.
Yeah. Okay.
So actually, one of the things which this question which Shriyanka just asked about different learning, whatever visual, etc., is the importance of both hands-on and minds-on activities in classroom situations. In order to both work with people who like one or the other, but also develop the other in the people who like one. People who like minds-on should develop hands-on capabilities. People like hands-on things should develop minds-on capabilities. So one of the things which we've been trying to push for, which we think is missing in schools, is the minds-on part. Hands-on things, there are a lot of people doing my hands-on activities, things like that, but which also need improvement. But the minds-on stuff. So, for example, one of the examples we've been discussing recently was taking a cylinder and slicing it in various ways and getting students to figure out what are the various sorts of shapes which come out of that. What are the various shapes which you will get? What are the various cross sections which you would get when you cut? And that's something which we don't want students to actually cut. Maybe later they can start cutting, but initially what we want them to do is to think about it in their mind and cut in their mind. Because that's a very important ability as a mathematician, to be able to do all of these things in your mind.
There is a question.
Yes, Vaidesh, yes, we will email that to you.
Yeah. Vaidesh, Tara has written it down. She will type it up and email it. And now there's a question from Sriram, which says, what exactly is Socratic inquiry? I ask this because I often find people using Socratic inquiry to mean any inquiry process. Is that a subset? Strictly speaking, the kind of inquiry that Socrates was, what is called Socratic method, is what is found in Plato's dialogues.
Yeah.
So Socrates claimed, at least, we don't know if it was actually Socrates who claimed it or Plato who made him claim that. But let's say Socrates, the character, claimed that we all have knowledge of things, but we can bring it out through questions. So he claimed that the slave boy that he was talking to knew many things, and all that Socrates was doing was simply to ask questions, and the slave boy will gradually figure out that he knew certain things which he wasn't aware of. If you look at the Socratic method very carefully, at least the kind of Socratic method that Plato made Socrates use, quite often there will be questions like, this is so and such, don't you agree? And the slave boy would say yes. We say, actually, Socrates was really planting ideas in the slave boy's head. So Socrates, in other words, was not using the Socratic method. So no, this was cheating.
Actually, it's the Socratic method. It's not the inquiry method. That's what you're leading up to.
Well, but you could use the word Socratic method to mean
inquiry,
that the student learns it. In which case, yes. I mean, you don't plant things in the student's head. You simply make the students inquire, investigate, and figure out things on his own, her own. Yes. So the actual Socrates was not really using Socratic method. There is a comment from Shriyanka. saying thank you for the hands-on versus minds-on.
Is there any gender lens as regards response to inquiry-oriented education? Gender lens? Madhav? Jayashree?
I don't think any men and women are different with respect to inquiry. There are differences across humans.
Right.
So Tara and I obviously use different modes, but I don't know if it is because Tara is a woman and I am a man. I doubt very much. There are certain things that Tara is capable of, which I am not capable of. Certain things I tend to do that Tara doesn't tend to do. And so we get on each other's nerves.
I'm guessing that's individual differences more than
Yeah. So as far as we know, there isn't any.
Yeah.
The gender differences are largely stereotypes. People who say, oh, women cannot do math and women are not irrational, all those things, which we don't subscribe to. There is Vignesh saying, Vignesh disjoint. Vignesh, you used a taboo word in this conversation. You said, sir, I just joined now. You are not allowed to do that. You cannot use the word sir.
No, unless you're talking about Tara and Jayashree.
Okay, that's okay. All right.
Then you have to say Sar.
All right.
Gender lens. We are on gender lens.
Exactly. So,
beginning teachers to use inquiry.
You can't use inquiry in teaching unless you know how to inquire yourself, first of all. Right?
That is what I used to think at some point. I'm beginning to wonder if it is possible to give a lesson plan to teach a set of lesson plans like recipes.
Sure.
Yeah, that's different. But then the teacher is not using inquiry. The teacher is using. The students are engaging in inquiry, but the teacher is not using inquiry. But so if you're saying you want teachers to use inquiry, they need to be inquirers.
They can use inquiry-oriented lesson plans.
Right.
Teaching materials. Yes. And then in the course of using it, for about a year or so, the teacher will also become an inquirer because the teacher will learn with the students. But ideally, under ideal circumstances, of course, a good inquirer using inquiry-oriented learning will be the best combination.
Yeah, could you talk a bit more about the depth of planning for inquiry? So let me take that up a little bit. So for a lesson plan which we write, the ones on the Think website, each of those takes maybe 15-20 hours of work. They're not things which are written just before a class, etc. They would take a lot of time. So those sorts of things we can't expect a teacher to do that for every class that they take. So teachers will have to use materials which other people create, other inquirers create, to be able to have very high quality inquiry-oriented classes. Of course, they will adapt them, change them around, and some they will be able to create. But asking a teacher to spend 15 hours on a 1 or 2 hour session is, I think, a bit much.
Actually, you said something like some of the lesson plans take 15 hours and so on. Some take much more. In fact, the grandfather example
has taken far more than that.
5 years perhaps. Yeah, because we use a particular task and then we revise it and we discuss it with friends and then it gets changed. So this has undergone a huge bunch of transformation.
Actually, before we get to the students, even to do inquiry, how to do inquiry with teachers, remember we took something like 600 hours of preparation for a 5-day workshop in Bhutan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it does take huge amounts of time, if that's what you mean by depth of planning. But then the point is, as more and more people come together and create those lesson plans, create those materials, it becomes easier for the newcomers.
And the more there are, the easier it becomes for new people to learn that mode.
So we have been doing this for the last how many years?
25 years?
No, 81 is when we
first
started it, 1981 onwards. And so the result that you're viewing is actually...
Yeah. Actually, there's another question here from Suman. which is also somewhat related.
Yeah.
Suman, we have, if you start this at the undergraduate level, college level, by then certain modes of thinking, modes of learning have already set in, which are very hard to break through. It's much easier if, and children are capable of, right from the beginning are capable of doing inquiry as long as it is pitched to their level, right, in terms of content and in terms of the language used and so on. You say, as in a class of 100, can I as a teacher trigger inquiry-oriented learning for the entire course? Yes, you can. We've done that for an entire course with 450 students at the college level. I'm sure, I mean, the tasks will have to be sort of, molded for large numbers. There will not be a chance for individual feedback to every student if you have that many, and so on. However, it is possible. A large number.
An example is this course. So we are working.
Yeah, that's correct. Exactly. There are 280 participants.
No, but then with the 280 participants, there are several of us talking about it.
Yeah.
What happens when there is a single teacher teaching a large class? I think we do have to take that into consideration.
To give someone a brief idea, what we did in such cases, this was what we did in Singapore. We would create those tasks and give them in the handout form distributed to students a week ahead of time, and the students will work in groups between classes and send us group responses, and then we'll discuss their group responses in class.
The next class.
So it's actually a weekly cycle of doing this. That takes immense amount of planning, effort, and I think both of us got exhausted by the end of the... I don't think we'll do that now. We are getting too old. We don't have that kind of energy anymore. But if you have a group of people, that is doable.
So just to add to that, so it becomes, what Tara was saying is, it becomes harder as the kids get older to get them to be inquirers. It's not impossible. You can have 80-year-olds can become an inquirer, but it just gets harder. And I'm sure anyone who's worked with 4th graders, 10th graders, college students, all of those will see a progression of them becoming less interested on average. Not everybody. There will be some people who aren't. But if you work with a 4th grade class, everybody is involved in the class and everybody is excited. But as they get older, from experience, I'm sure many people would have seen that. Any more questions?
There is a question from Priyanka. Historically, we have been taught would initially inquiry be overwhelming. No, if you begin inquiry in the 1st grade, or in fact even more, like Anjali is 3 years old, the children are natural born inquirers. You really have to try hard to make them abandon inquiry. They enjoy inquiry. So all that you have to do is to actually nurture the potential.
And beyond that, the question about will it be overwhelming or will it be, sort of great to find that you found what you're looking for. That really depends on individuals. It's very hard to say, I think.
No, but the probability of
the course we did with the workshop we did with 9th graders last year. If you look at the videos online, those ones there's a feedback video at the beginning. It was the opposite of overwhelmed. It was excitement. That it was, why haven't we done this before? Why hasn't all our school experience been like this?
Now that is at the 9th grade level, and it was a small group of students. If you go further, say 2nd year undergraduate and a larger class, you're going to get far fewer people who are excited by it.
Actually, in every undergraduate course that we have taught, they have an extreme points of view. There have been something like 10% or 20% students who hate it intensely, and 10-20% who think this is the greatest thing that ever happened to them. And this is in some sense natural, because as we grow older, physical exercises that we are not used to become, we don't feel good about it. So if you ask me, for example, you can see what I look like. If you ask me to bend and touch my toes, I can't do that. But I was able to do that when I was a child. And if you ask me to jog now, I will hate you. The same thing would happen to undergraduate students. But with children, that is not the case. Their minds have not become rigid. So it's much easier to begin with very young children. Should we? This is a relatively easy question to answer. So, Yankas?
Inquiry and enquiry?
This is British versus American. But I think some people also use the word ENQUIRY to mean, for example, inquiry office. You know, in the railway station inquiry office, where somebody has the information and you ask for the information, you get the information. That would be ENQUIRY.
And then in some places you find INQUIRY.
For that?
For that
Oh,
as
okay,
well.
then,
so it's, I don't think it makes a difference. I don't think we should make that. Let's stick to the, since we've been using INQUIRY, let's just stick with that. And, you know.
There is Vignesh.
Now you
Vignesh is cheating. This is cheating, Vignesh. First to say, so he is finding it difficult to say Tara and Mohan.
This is like Guamaji and Guapaji.
Okay. If you could talk about some reference books the beginning educators like me can use to learn more about inquiry. Yeah, we could. Yeah.
So if you look on the Think website at recommended resources, there's a bunch of things we put there which are recommended for people who want to become inquirers themselves and want to become good thinkers themselves.
Madhav, have you given a book list?
Yeah. So there's there's quite a few. So there's, for example, there's Polya, there's there's the Einstein Infeld, there's a bunch of them. So if you look there, and we'll keep adding more. So once you keep looking there, that's a great way.
So there doesn't seem to be. Are there any further questions?
I don't think so as yet, but
there are 7 viewers now. So who is the new person?
Vignesh was the one who joined us.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we have an 8th viewer, but
there's 8. Okay. Can the 8th person, the person who joined just now, introduce himself or herself? Oh, incidentally, maybe we should introduce ourselves again. I am Mohanan, and this is Tara.
Madhav.
Jayashree.
And Bhagish and Sriparna are not here. They are tied up with something else. Oh, I should also introduce my favorite things. What you see behind me over there are chilies. The best thing to eat if you want to become inquirers. Yeah, of course.
Raw mango.
So who is the 8th person? Oh, Madhav, you have to tell them how to type the stuff, where to type.
So on the right, everybody, there's a place where you can put in questions and comments, etc., and we'll pick them up from there.
Self-introduction.
Yeah. So the other thing which we thought we would pick up on is assessment. Just for a little bit. I think that's something which will come more towards the end of the course. So, Mo, could you maybe give one or two examples of assessing inquiry?
Okay, let me try this one. Suppose we ask a question: what is the formula for the volume of a sphere? And this is something that children can learn, memorize without really understanding the formula. And can they reproduce it? They write the correct formula. Let me take a worst case. You say, what is the formula for a sphere and the volume of a sphere? And then you give 5 options. One of them is the correct option. Now you don't even have to memorize it. All that you have to be is vaguely familiar with the formula. Then you can pick out the right one.
I don't know.
Yeah. So those are the worst case scenarios. Now, suppose you move from that to the following question. You are given a bunch of Mosambis. That's right, and you have to figure out. Let's say there are 10,000 Mosambis, and you have to figure out how much volume, how much juice you will get if you squeeze the Mosambis. But you are not allowed to squeeze. You are not allowed to cut. Nothing. It is quite possible that most students may not think of the following way of doing it. One is to just measure the diameter of the Mosambi. That's easy. You can, keep 2 books like this on the table and keep a Mosambi in between. Imagine that my head is a Mosambi, and figure out the distance between the two. And once you know the diameter, you can figure out the volume of Mosambi as a whole. Of course, you have to eliminate the volume taken up by the skin of the Mosambi and the pulp and so on. You can make some kind of assumption about that, how much pulp and how much juice in one Mosambi. Then you multiply the volume of one Mosambi by 10,000. You get
the juice of one Mosambi.
Pardon me? The juice, yeah. Right. And you get the answer. Of course, there is another way of doing it, namely you take a bucket and you put some Mosambis in the water and find out how much water the Mosambis have displaced, and again do the same thing. You can figure out the juice. Now, this is not simply the first type. The first type is simply memorizing and repeating what you have learned. The second one is the application to solve a problem. This requires some inquiry. Inquiry not of pure mathematics or pure physics, but applied mathematics. The kind of stuff that you need, for example, in engineering technology to solve a problem. So if you can ask questions of this kind to probe into inquiry abilities of students. We'll give more examples of this kind.
And this probes into understanding of the concept behind it.
Yeah.
It even probes into knowledge.
I think
there is a new person who has joined us.
And there's also a question from Sriram. Arun's first. Hi, Arun. If you're there.
I have thought many times in my work, if humanity took a fatal turn somewhere in the journey of learning to educate its young. No questions yet, but any thoughts? I don't know if that is the case, because you find the introduction of inquiry, doubting and questioning and so on at many times in the history, and gradually it changes. Dies out slowly. So, for example, Buddha suggested doubting and questioning authorities and investigating on one's own. Socrates tried that. And then you find that both in the Indian culture and the Western culture, that the culture of inquiry, culture of debating, culture of discussion, so that gradually is replaced by respect for authority.
You just contradicted yourself. You said Socrates didn't do Socratic thing, which means he was doing inquiry.
No. There was a time in the Greek, when I said Socrates, I mean the Greek period.
All right.
I didn't mean the Socratic, so-called Socratic method.
Right, not Socrates.
Right, that is right. Yeah. And then it's replaced by authority, reverence. And then you find this again during Renaissance. And especially during the Enlightenment period, again, there is a kind of rebellion against all forms of authority, intellectual authority, political authority, religious authority. And science is born out of that rebellion against authority. And finally, you find that, subsequently you find that science itself becomes a religion. So these things happen, I guess, in cycles. And we are trying to initiate another, let us say, upsurge of inquiry. And if you are successful, maybe the whole of India, and gradually it will spread to the rest of the world too.
And then collapse.
Perhaps. Possibly collapse as well. But there are many people who do this in various parts of the world, in islands. Islands in the sense like us, there are others who do similar things. So I don't know if this is true about humanity in general, that there is one fatal wrong turn. In fact, even today, the two cultures are in conflict: the culture of obedience and the culture of rebellion. Inquiry is a culture of rebellion and disobedience. Sriram.
Sriram's question is, let me just read it. He says, in general, has inquiry learning become more difficult thanks to Google or Googling? If the inquirer is a youngster, chances are that he or she would be keen on getting to know the answer rather than enjoying the process of inquiry. What do you think? So, in some ways, the introduction of Googling and things like that actually calls for more use of inquiry rather than use of just knowledge and things like that, because students can just Google it and it answer an exam paper. With soon, students will be, now students are people will smuggle in their phones into examination halls and get the answers to information-based questions in 5 seconds. If your question in that assessment is inquiry oriented rather than inquiry oriented rather than a knowledge question, even if the student has open books and open internet and anything to use, in some situations they will still have to think to come up with the answer. So I would say Google and Googling requires inquiry to be a part of assessments, etc., and a part of learning rather than the current situation. And also now with Khan Academy and various other things available to give you information and knowledge, you don't necessarily need your teacher to give you that. You need your teacher to give you the abilities to be able to use that knowledge, to be able to understand that knowledge, to be able to probe into that knowledge.
To add to that, let's think about the history of collective knowledge acquisition. Before the invention of writing, if somebody wanted to know something, you had to go and ask somebody for the answer. So you had to communicate knowledge only through oral transmission. That used to be the case. Once writing comes into existence, you don't have to really ask the person who knows. It's in the written form. So that means you could actually get the information from somebody who died 200 years ago. That wasn't possible earlier because it was oral transmission. And when printing comes into existence, it becomes even easier because now you can reproduce books, thousands of copies. So you can, somebody who wrote a book, printed it in Blease, now you can have access to that in India with some difficulty. But notice, with the invention of the internet, now it is instantaneous. Like if you don't know something, you simply type something on Google and you can learn it immediately. So information access becomes far easier. Inquiry part hasn't become easier except for the information access. So if I now want to investigate the classification, construct a theory of classification for biology, I can get the information so easily just by going to Wikipedia and getting the information from there. Whereas if I wanted to do that about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I would have had to read so many books. It would have taken me a lot of time. So that's a difference that has become, actually, that has come to me.
So in other words, what you're saying is the internet has facilitated inquiry because you have the information there in order to inquire further.
As a teacher, I don't need to provide information that the students can easily access. This is the point that Mother was saying. Teachers are not needed to provide the information. The internet can do that much better.
That ties up with Shriyanka's question.
Yes. What's the question?
In the knowledge system, the mandate of the teacher was to provide that information.
Right.
Knowledge. How do you define the role of teacher in inquiry-oriented education? As somebody who helps and guides inquiry, guides students to arrive at answers and the evidence and arguments for the answers, and to be able to justify those answers.
And in the course of doing that, the teacher may have to point to where they can get the information or what kind of information they should get. There might also be a few cases, very small number of cases, where the teacher may have to summarize the information, clarify the information, and sometimes synthesize the information.
Very often, not very often, but at least sometimes, there will also be situations where the teacher will have to say, I don't know.
I think that is the most important role. I don't know, and occasionally nobody seems to know. This is the question that nobody has answers to. And it's very important to say that. Okay, we have kind of.
Anything else? Anybody?
Either we have exhausted all of us who are listening to us, or they want to go have some coffee.
Okay. Anyway, are there any other things which we want to talk about, or are we?
Yeah, I guess what we should do is to, if we, this is available as a videotape for the rest of the people, they would know what kinds of things to expect, so there'll be more people joining us the next time.
Hmm. Yeah. No,
And they can also, yeah.
Are there any other things which any one of us wants to touch upon before we stop?
Not really, yeah. I mean, unless they ask us questions, we wouldn't know what to say.
Okay.
So, shall we say we enjoyed it, and we also hope that you also enjoyed it.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
And for people who came late, the entire conversation is on our YouTube channel. It will be in like a minute.
Yeah.
Probably an hour or so. It will take some time to process. So it'll be there soon. Okay.
So.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye.